Hello, this is Nitin Dahad with EE Times. I'm here at the GISEC conference in Dubai, and I'm talking to Richard Robinson, who's a CEO and founder of Cynalytica. Richard, hello.
Howdy.
How are you doing?
Good, yourself?
Good. So, well, you're on the Virginia stand, so you're obviously based in Virginia.
We are based in Virginia.
Tell us why you're here.
So we're here for GISEC. We're here to announce a partnership with PwC.
Okay.
So we came out to the region in February, spent a couple weeks out here, met with some of the critical infrastructure companies here in the Middle East, in Saudi, Qatar, and UAE. And we seem to scratch an itch and a need here in critical infrastructure, so we're back at GISEC.
Now, we've been talking, in EE Times, we've been talking about critical infrastructure security for a long time, right, at the hardware and embedded software level. Now, you've been doing this. What's your background? Just tell us a little bit, and then we'll talk about what you're doing here.
So, originally, I started off academically as a manufacturing engineer, ended up getting sucked into IT. I was the only engineer that knew how to set up the email server at the time. Ultimately ended up being at one of the Department of Energy National Laboratories, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, when Stuxnet came out. Being a manufacturing engineer, being a national security, kind of understood the impact of what Stuxnet meant to critical infrastructure operators.
That was a defining moment, I guess. That was around
2010, yeah. Okay,
so you started Cynalytica then, or?
No, so I started working with the U.S. government, Department of Homeland Security. We realized earlier, I did, and the manufacturing community, that in certain events like Stuxnet, there was an inability to monitor some of the industrial control malware that was happening because we didn't have the electronics or the capability at the time.
And I think, just to remind us, Stuxnet was basically an intrusion on the HMI, but they didn't really see what was really going on the hardware level.
Yeah, exactly. So it learned what the operators did. It would then replay what was happening, and it would obfuscate what was really happening down at the control device in the environment. And since a lot of those communications were non-IP based, there's no way to monitor it.
Yeah. So what was your brainwave to come up with this?
Yeah, so the starting piece was actually to give operators the ability to monitor serial communications. So in the event you had a compromised HMI, PLC, engineering workstation, or the list goes on, you would have the ability to monitor those downstream non-IP communications that actually ended up going down to the field device. So we started off with serial guard. So what we wanted to do was serial communication. So the ability to monitor RS-232, 485, 422. But what we had to do is build a device that met requirements, being that it was passive, it was fail-safe, it wouldn't introduce a new threat vector. So what we ended up doing is building this sensor. It's actually an intelligent sensor. So it will frame the data based on the industrial control protocol, we'll encrypt it, we'll add a little more data to it, and then we'll bring it back via Ethernet or cellular to our analytics engine application, which then gives the operator to actually see what's really physically happening in their environment and not rely on its translation at the IP layer.
Okay, and so now how's that been for you? Has that been quite successful? You've been doing for how many years?
So we've been around for about 7-8 years.
Okay.
Our majority customers are within the U.S. government.
Okay.
So the U.S. government kind of early recognized this problem.
As it should with critical national infrastructure.
As it should with the infrastructure. Still a lot of people realize or don't realize how much critical infrastructure doesn't actually use IP communications. It uses serial and analog communications. In some industries, it can be as high as 85%.
Right. You're here because you've got good successes in the US, and you want to now target GCC, the countries here, and that's what the relationship with PwC is going to enable you to do?
Correct, yeah. So PwC was great. One of the early adopters on the consultancy and the integration and risk advisory that really understood the problem beyond IP. So one of the biggest challenges that we had is, a lot of money's been spent on marketing saying, hey, we solve all of your OT problems, but only if you're looking at, the IP side, and they kind of shove the non-IP side, under the rug.
So what's your sort of thoughts on the trends you're seeing here at the show? What are people asking you? What are they looking for?
So I think people are actually starting to ask the question. You're seeing more and more attacks on critical infrastructure, compromises. And people are starting to recognize that it is, once it compromises those IP systems, it's actually getting to the non-IP systems. So there's starting to be more of a recognition of this is a real problem.
Now you're a startup, you're privately funded, about 10 people, is that right?
Yeah, about 10 folks.
So what's your ambition? What do you want to do?
So we want to grow.
Yeah.
Really, education and awareness is really the biggest piece. Getting the industry to ask harder questions of the vendors that are supplying them stuff. Get to the truth of it, because unless they do that, there's still a large, significant amount of their infrastructure is exposed.
So Richard, what do you think is the big issue that people are missing at the moment?
Yeah. So the one thing that we want to do is, especially in the industrial control environment, is get out of the cyber tool debate. So a lot of CIOs and CISOs get wrapped around the axle when they're trying to evaluate cyber tools, because it's a cost center. So they need to maximize, what the efficiency of that tool is. But here we're able to get telematics and telemetry data out of the system, which is extremely valuable from an operational perspective. So one of the examples that we use here is we've got a water treatment facility where we can run different logical processes from the environment. We can collect that data and we can translate that data into costs. So we can look at current and energy consumption versus output and tell the operator which are the most economically efficient processes to use based on the logic and the data. At that point, you become a return on investment, and better cybersecurity is a derivative benefit of that process.
Yeah, because I think the debate has always been, should I invest in cybersecurity? But now you're saying, get the ROI on the investment through the operational efficiency that you can get.
Yeah, and from us then it's also changing who we're talking to. So if it's a cyber tool debate, we're talking to the CIO or the CISO. If it's an operational tool, we're talking to the CFO or the COO. They have money. The CIOs and the COs
that's
are always
always
fighting for money.
That's always been the challenge for cybersecurity vendors. It's just getting to the right people.
Exactly.
Who sign the checks. Well, Richard, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Pleasure.
you.